Àwọn tó ní wá lára bàbá. Ní wá lára o. Àwọn tó ní wá lára bàbá. Ní wá lára o. Ní wá lára bàbá.
Ọrùn yẹn pẹ̀lẹ́.
Ní wá lára o.
Well, as you can see, it was a busy day for Labour yesterday as they picketed the NERC offices nationwide, as well as discussed essentially against the hike in tariff for electricity. You heard the NLC president there or earlier on speaking about the tariffs and why they are protesting. But let's bring him in now on the show to shed more light on the reason for that protest. Perhaps if there's been some sort of outcome to it. We're joined by Comrade Joe Ajero, NLC president. He joins us virtually on the show this morning. Good morning, Comrade Ajero. Welcome to the morning brief.
Morning, thank you.
Well, a lot of people saw that protests across the country in their states and all for the NERC and the distribution companies. So let me begin from the end. Has there been any reaction or any concrete response from government saying, we've heard you, we see you, and this is what we're going to do about your requests?
Well, thank you very much. We were in NAC yesterday, and luckily enough, we got the chairman of the Regulatory Commission to talk with us. Same in the Power Ministry, and the Permanent Secretary spoke that they can't just stand up there and say they have reversed, that they were going to get across to the appropriate authorities, and then a matter of days and weeks get back to us. In the case of PAMSEC, Ministry of Power, it was clear that they have sent out letters. Us have not seen their letters of invitation for a meeting next week. So we'll wait for it and know how further to engage them.
So are you giving government an ultimatum to reduce the tariff? There's been some slight reduction earlier on, but are you giving a target to government saying by this time you ought to have reduced it so we know what we're working with here?
But this issue of, if we go into the politics of reduction, which is what they have played out, if you want, they reduce about 18 naira 20 kobo from it. So they only want us to say, okay, we have reduced it by maybe 20 naira or 10 naira. No, there is usually a structure. No, if you have vast tariff methodology and structuring, you have to factor in all other factors, including consultation. Consultation with stakeholders has to be enriched. And then you equally look at the purchasing power of individuals who are to pay that money. You equally look at the energy source, because if Nigeria the tariff is being structured based on gas, and Nigeria has gas source and hydro source all over the world. Electricity generated through renewable energy like hydro are very cheap. So the NEC cannot continue to deceive Nigerians on the issue of fossil oil, fossil fuel, with the cost is high, which is gas, as if it is only thermal stations that we have in the country. So we have to look at the model, look at what they're offering. And these are issues that we have, and this is must happen before tariff increase. It's not reduction after tariff increase. So we have to look at it holistically. At least some of us have little knowledge in that field.
Well, Comrade, how satisfactory is the position of the chairman of the NERC during the picketing yesterday that there is a presidential initiative on metering for all Nigerians, which has set a target date? Particularly, does the NLC have a structure to ensure that indeed this metering program is conducted such that Nigerians will stop being slammed estimated billing?
Well, that is almost a polemic. President Obasanjo came up with that policy, and we have companies like Z-Glasses in Lagos and Ikeja. I think by that time about 3 billion naira provision was made. I wouldn't know whether that money was released to them or not. Then President Buhari, in his metering initiative policy, I served in the committee, with first with Skiamo, and then the Minister of State Power then, as members, where they had a policy of providing 6 million meters, for the country. Until President Buhari left office, we moved around, even looking at domestic companies that produce meter, Momos and other companies, we visited them, and even they realized that these local companies can provide the needed meters for this country. And between that time and now, that didn't happen. So if I'm hearing now that there's a presidential initiative on metering and provision of meters for people, I still look at it from what is happening or what has happened before now. So unless there's any concrete assurance, that this one now will not be like the others, then I will be grateful to it. However, I think that might be based on partnership with the government and the discourse, because every company determines, or produces their own metering gadget. Every company in the world, even those that say they're in the market, they provide their own costs. So I wouldn't know whether it's the federal government part of their own grant or subsidy to the district that are providing these meters. But whichever way, I think there's need for Nigerians to have meter. And providing meter is not rocket science. Countries like India, you can walk into a shop and buy a meter. So I wouldn't know why Nigeria's case would be a different thing.
Comrade, I'm happy that although you're the NLC president, but that's your sector, the electricity sector, so you have a lot of knowledge in that direction. We know that we have produced slightly over 5,000 megawatts in history, maybe not up to 6, despite the over 10,000 or 13,000 megawatts we have installed. Now, I said that to ask you this particular question on, let's look at it in details. The minister has said that if we don't remove subsidy, we may be in trouble in the future. So let's talk about funding and viability. Some are saying that if this hike is not put in place or this review is not put in place, we may not be able to attract the right investors to be able to sustain the power sector. Is that what you see from the point of someone who plays in that sector, not necessarily NLC president?
Well, I know that the sector is capital intensive. I'm equally aware that policies like privatization in countries where they have taken place, certain things were done first. There is no country in the world where the private sector, developed their power sector. No country. Because of the cost-intensive nature of that sector. And that was why when the federal government decided to privatize with 4,000 megawatts, in fact, then it wasn't up to 4,000. It was President Yar'Adua that said, no, let's delay this process for about 3 years to enable us to have this product available. And if you check anybody who's an expert in energy, they will tell you that you have to match the issue of availability, accessibility before you talk of even affordability. Now, they now say they are bringing in investors. Unfortunately, the investors they brought in the first instance, and I say this without apology, are not the people that were the right investors, with the technical competence, with managerial ability, and who are to attract foreign direct investment. So you can see that after 12 years of privatizing the sector, no investment is coming into the sector. Now, as no investment is coming into the sector, that brought us back to where we were before, when we said that the current no private sector can even invest in the power sector on even 10 years return on investment. So what percentage of return on investment are you going to invest and wait for about 15 years? And that's the nature of the power sector. And that is why all over the world, the states drive the process of developing the sector. After that, post-industrialization, you can now talk of managing the sector. Not that you call maybe Mr. Ajero to generate electricity and distribute and recoup his investment within 4 years, 5 years is not possible. That is the nature of the sector. And the earlier we realize it, the better. And not to just transfer the burden on the poor masses, especially a country that is not highly industrialized, and you depend on just people who are using it for electric bulb or for cooking or for taking their beds. So I think there is need for us to look at, the state withdrawal from the sector and the time they did, whether it was right, and what do we do in this material instance. And if, apart from withdrawal, the state has continued, and I'm talking of the Nigerian state, has continued to subsidize the sector up to now. If you watch, the sector was sold at about 400 billion. And Nigerian state has invested almost 2 trillion in that sector. So why did you sell it in the first instance if you are going to subsidize another man's business? These are issues that are open for further discussion so that we can find the right way, to go and the right path to follow.
Well, it looks like at this point, Labour is fighting, different battles on different fronts. So that today or yesterday we saw the picketing. Perhaps tomorrow we'll see Labour's push for a new minimum wage. And every other day we hear Labour talking about the cost of living, inflation, and seeking better welfare for workers. So different battles really for Labour to fight. But let's sit back and just sort of analyze the scale of preference for Labour in this. So if you want the federal government to bring down the tariff of electricity in the country, the government has said, well, that would basically mean returning the subsidies in large scale, even though we understand that there's still some sort of subsidy anyway, but returning it in large scale. Again, you're asking for an increase in minimum wage. So if government is also subsidizing electricity, where will they get money for the minimum wage to increase to, I don't know what the agreement will be eventually. If it's 615,000, well and good. Where do you expect government to get that money from? There's also the trying to fight inflation, invest in infrastructure and the rest. So what is the scale of preference for Labour as you approach these demands?
Yeah, let's separate this, the extent that the power sector, before privatization, I didn't hear of any subsidy, not even 10 million subsidy. And then post-privatization, and we are now hearing of government subsidizing it in trillions. The issue is that where did the issue of subsidy come in? It's important we look at this, and very instructive. Two, we have to look at the issue of cause and effect. If the cost of inflation, part of it is tariff increase in the electricity sector, and then you have increased tariff, you have collected even the minimum wage from us even before it is approved. That calls for concern by the labor movement. And all these things you mentioned, if we are trying to check the cost of all this cost of living in the country. Now, unknown to people, this issue of tariff increase is determined by inflation and the value of the currency. NEC takes these two major variables, to decide tariff increase. Now, unknown to NEC, the same NEC, each time they increase tariff, it leads to another inflation, which within few months, they will still go back to demand for another tariff increase. And this is happening on and on and on, and there's no way, no control over it. Now, if you check, what actually constitutes the tariff which they are telling us, why is government subsidizing it? At what point is government subsidizing NEPA? Before I knew, we used to have Electricity Corporation of Nigeria, ECL, and Niger Dam Authority that were merged, to be NEPA. And then because of this problem of challenges of distribution and generation, now we told them that if you are dividing them into 3 companies and you are creating 18 companies from one company, you are creating about 4 EDs in each company multiplied by 18. You are creating double assignments, and you are creating double expenses on the same 3 or 4,000 megawatts. This is the implication. So if you are talking of subsidy, what is this subsidy going into? Are there new power plants? The power plant that was built in 1968, are they buying new gadgets to construct it? What is the new power plant that is costing Nigeria all this big money? These are the challenges. Did they remove all the wires in the country and all the poles? What is this cost implication that we are talking of cost, reflective tariff? What are they all about? Is it just for the salaries of the new EDs and MDs that are scattered all over the world? We have to sit down and look at what constitutes this.
Well, you would understand all of these issues, being a former leader at the Nigeria Union of Electricity Workers. But, comrade, some are viewing the response of Labour to all of these issues from a broader perspective, and for good reason, because of the NLC's affiliation with the Labour Party. And they're saying that, even the presidential candidate of the Labour Party campaigned on some of these issues, the removal of fuel subsidy, the floating of the Naira. And so as a result of that, they're saying that, look, isn't it hypocritical for the NLC under your leadership to oppose these issues with, some would say outdated socialist approaches to how you are tackling government's policies? How would you weigh in on this, comrade?
Ordinarily, I wouldn't have responded to this question you asked now, because we are a bit fixated on this issue. And since after 2023, this is a Labour presidential candidate of Labour Party. I think we should move on from this. Is the presidential candidate of Labour Party, does he own NLC, or does NLC own the Labour Party? Why can't you separate? Whosoever is the presidential candidate or an official of the Labour Party must buy into our project. If he says he was going to undertake that policies, let him be elected and try such policies. So this question, I want to just show courtesy. I don't think there is any link between it. Whether a presidential candidate of a party that Labour formed will dictate for Labour. The answer is known to you and to everybody. So I think we have to leave it this way. The policies of Labour, the ideology of Labour is clear, and we're going to pursue it. If anybody is coming with the market ideology, he's going to have it tough with us, because that's not what we stand for. Are
you saying, comrade, that your approach would have been the same had the Labour Party won the election?
It would have been worse for anybody flying the flag of Labour Party to come and implement these policies, to come and adopt the policies of IMF and the World Bank. It would have been worse for the person. In fact, we will disown the person, he will be on his own. So I think we have to make this distinction clear.
So let's talk about what alternative you're bringing to the table, because you're going to be negotiating tomorrow when it comes to the minimum wage. The federal government has now said that, the president, I should say, has now said that MDA should run on CNG-powered vehicles going forward when they are making purchases, and now the issue of electricity tariff hike and all of that. And I don't know that that picketing will continue or not. Maybe you give us that information. So what exactly is Labour proposing as a sequence of events for us to have the kind of policy that would be favorable, at least to a minimal extent, to the Nigerian worker? Because it's not just resisting policy of government, you need to bring something to the table.
Yeah, when you are invited to the table, you bring so many things to the table. Unfortunately, the issue of CNG, which I'm happy now that the president has shown interest, was brought by Labour. In fact, at the first meeting we had with government representatives, we were asking what was the meaning of CNG, and we explained to them. And we tried to explain to them that if you had waited for us to introduce the CNG policy, and for it to start working, the effect of subsidy removal wouldn't have been noticed by Nigerians. And I'm happy that Mr. President is showing a lot of interest in that regard. And if that happens, the cost of living will come down drastically. Cost of transportation, the cost of feeding, so much cost of even fueling our vehicles. It will affect, some of the issues we raised. That if the cost and inflation are reduced, now the demand, by Labour will be a different thing. But if the costs continue to go up, we don't seem to have option in this regard. So I think that will be a welcome development. Now, if we have a real and robust energy policy, where the tariff, is sensitive to the cost of living, sensitive to the wage of the people in such an environment, and where you have availability of electricity, if there is availability, it will equally drag down the issue of the idea of affordability. If we bring this into to be a policy of government, the demand by labor and the minimum wage will not be as high as we are looking at.
Clearly, something needs to shift, and we need to start thinking out of the box because we find ourselves in a very tough situation as a people and as a nation. Well, some will say it's global, but my point here is this. Whatever decision is made eventually regarding the wages would need to trickle down. There will need to be some regularization, even for the public sector. So believe it or not, the public sector is also looking to see how this will play out. But I want to ask you a sort of personal question. If a decision were to be made on minimum wage and it's agreed upon by the tripartite committee, let's say, hypothetically speaking, 615,000 naira, if you were to employ someone, maybe someone working with you, would you be able to pay, and would you be willing to pay the minimum wage that is eventually agreed upon? 615, 400, whatever the case is.
Well, there are employers in Nigeria that are paying 1 million, whether public or private. The issue of wage is determined by a lot of factors. As a matter of law, there are people that fall within the Minimum Wage Act, and the law permits it. Whether it is people that employ 50 people, people that employ 20 people, as the case may be. They may not be, hypothetically speaking, the way you put it, you employ one person, you pay him this. However, the issue of wage payment, especially by private individuals, is dependent on the agreement at the point of negotiation and the point of hiring, on what you can pay and what the person is willing to accept, based equally on his expertise, based on job evaluation and job analysis. If the employer knows that he's hiring somebody, who is going to make input that will make him to produce have a profit of 1.5 million, and you decide to hire the person at 1 million rate, so be it. But what I'm telling you is that there are rules that involve when you employ and what you pay, not actually can you pay this amount. If I have a business that I will employ an expert who will make that business to run, and I make profit on it, why wouldn't I?
So you're well and able to pay, if it's 615,000 naira agreed upon, you will pay it as minimum wage to someone you employ as well.
I hire somebody to do a job, and like I said, there's job evaluation and job analysis. I know that this is the job this person is going to do. This is what is going to come out of it. I will pay whatever amount I agree with the person.
Well, comrade, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and we're glad that we're having this conversation. It's important to lay all the cards on the table so everybody will understand. So I'll be following to see the outcome of that meeting. I understand it will be tomorrow. Am I correct?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Right.
15th.
All right. So we'll do well to keep in touch. And of course, we're supporting the Labour and the Nigerian state in all of this. Thank you so much for your time, Comrade Joe Ajero, President of the NLC. Wish you the very best.
Yes.